I was standing in my childhood driveway with a suitcase in one hand and the sound of bulldozers growling in the background. My breath caught in my throat as the machine's steel jaws took the first bite out of the porch column, the same one I used to sit on every Halloween dressed as a vampire or princess depending on the year. The cold Colorado wind bit at my face, but the chill running through me wasn't from the weather. It was from betrayal, plain, ruthless, and raw. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Isabel," my older brother Tyler said, tossing a casual glance over his shoulder as he walked toward his BMW parked neatly at the curb. He didn't wait for a response. He never had. Behind him, my sister Rachel stood beside the demolition crew, arms folded, sunglasses on, phone in hand, like she was overseeing a corporate merger instead of the destruction of the only home I'd ever known. "It's just a house bell," she called out as if the word just could strip it of all meaning. "You can't live in the past forever." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat burned. My parents' home, well, what I thought was still my parents' home, had just been sold, and I'd been evicted in less than 48 hours. No warning, no explanation. Just a glossy letter slipped under my bedroom door yesterday morning. Apparently, they'd unanimously decided it was time to let go of the past and move forward as a family. That family no longer included me. The house had been sold to a property developer. The buyer didn't even wait a full day before scheduling the teardown. What stunned me wasn't the sale itself. It was the speed, the cruelty, the fact that every single one of them, Rachel, Tyler, even my Aunt Gloria, stood there like this was some long-awaited relief, as if my existence was holding them back. The final blow came when Rachel's husband handed me a manila envelope. "Your severance," he said with a tight-lipped smirk, like this was an HR meeting. Inside, a prepaid Visa card with $300 and a handwritten note. "We wish you well, but you've outgrown this place. 30 years in that house. Countless nights nursing my grandmother through chemo. Repainting the living room myself when Mom's arthritis flared up. Rebuilding the front steps with Dad before he passed away. And I get a prepaid card and a demolition crew. For the record, I wasn't some freeloading cousin crashing on their couch. I lived there. Legally. I was paying property taxes from my freelance architecture income quietly, consistently, even when things got tight. I cooked, cleaned, managed all the home repairs while the others only showed up for holidays, Instagram selfies, and guilt-gifting birthdays. But none of that mattered. The house was a burden, a wasted opportunity. They had other plans. Tyler wanted to invest in a startup he barely understood. Rachel wanted to move to Los Angeles for a wellness lifestyle brand. Aunt Gloria, who never lifted a finger for anyone except herself, was convinced we should all put the past into perspective and pursue higher vibrational choices. And I was disposable. I stared at the splintering wood, the clouds of dust rising from the walls that once held my grandmother's laughter, my father's coughs, and my mother's endless humming while baking cinnamon rolls. I should have screamed. I should have thrown myself in front of the wrecking ball. But I didn't. Instead, I stood still, burning their faces into my memory one by one. Tyler's smug ambition, Rachel's detached cruelty, Gloria's faux spiritual garbage. Not a single one of them flinched as the roof collapsed inward with a thunderous crack. "You'll thank us later," Gloria said as she passed me on her way to her Tesla. "We released you from the illusion." Illusion. She hadn't seen the letter tucked away in my closet drawer, the one from Grandma Lorraine written 2 years ago. The one that ended with, "When I'm gone, make sure this house stays with someone who understands love." I hadn't read it in months, but every word was etched in me. And yet now that house, our house, was gone. Bulldozed to make way for some soulless glass condo with bike lockers and a rooftop bar. My suitcase felt heavier in my hand than it should have. Not because of what was inside, just some clothes, a sketchbook, and 2 boxes of tea, but because it carried the weight of being discarded by people I had once called family. I walked away slowly, step by step, down the cracked sidewalk of Hawthorne Street. I didn't look back again. Not because I didn't care, because if I did, I might break. I took the bus to my friend Jasmine's apartment on 8th Avenue. She opened the door in slippers and a frizzy bun and didn't ask a single question. just pulled me into a hug and handed me a cup of hot cocoa with marshmallows already melting inside. I slept that night on her couch under a faded quilt and a feeling I couldn't quite name. It wasn't grief. That would come later. It was the hollow throb of being erased. The next morning, as the sky turned silver over Denver's skyline, I opened my laptop to check emails for work, and there it was. A message from Franklin and Lowell, LLP, a law firm I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Subject line regarding property deed, 41 Hawthorne Street. My pulse jumped. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. Inside was a scanned PDF, a notarized deed, a digital signature from my grandmother, and 3 typed lines that would flip my entire world upside down. Owner of record Isabel Grant. Date of transfer, February 12th, 2021. Legal title status, sole property owner. I blinked at the screen. Once, twice. Then I started to laugh. A quiet, disbelieving laugh that turned sharp at the edges. Because they hadn't just kicked me out of a family home. They had torn down a house. That legally belonged to me. I stared at the screen, blinking back the sting in my eyes. There it was. My name in black and white, stamped and signed sole owner of 41 Hawthorne Street. I reread the date, February 12th, 2021, over and over like my brain was trying to argue with reality. That was nearly 2 years ago. My grandmother had transferred ownership of the house to me while she was still alive, months before she passed away. She must have never told anyone else, or maybe she had and they chose to ignore it. I could hear the soft click of Jasmine's coffee machine from the kitchen. My legs felt weak as I stood, the laptop screen still glowing behind me, casting eerie light on the cluttered little living room. Jazz. I called, my voice thinner than I expected. She peeked around the corner with a sleepy smile. What's up? I walked in slowly, laptop in hand. Remember how I said they sold the house and kicked me out like I didn't exist? She nodded. Yeah, the family that makes Succession look like a Disney movie? I turned the screen toward her. Turns out they sold a house that didn't belong to them. She leaned in, then froze. Wait, what? Her eyes darted across the screen. Is this real? I nodded. Notarized. Witnessed. Grandma signed the property over to me 2 years ago. I don't know why she didn't tell them, but legally, it was mine the whole time. Jasmine set the mug down with a sharp thud. Holy hell. Her voice dropped. Is this, like, criminal? What they did, I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet. But I intended to find out. That afternoon, I took the light rail downtown, the PDF printed and tucked into a folder beneath my arm. I walked into a law office I had passed 100 times on 17th Street. One of those tall glass buildings where everyone walks too fast and wears too much cologne. My boots tracked melted snow across the marble floor as I stepped into the reception area of Carson & Blake Attorneys at Law. The receptionist blinked up at me with polite indifference. Do you have an appointment? No, I replied, holding up the folder. But I have a deed and a demolished house that legally belonged to me. That got her attention. An hour later, I was sitting in a polished office with a real estate lawyer named Davis Tran. He was in his early 40s, wore an oatmeal-colored sweater vest, and had the kind of calm voice you only hear in meditation apps. He scanned the document, flipped through the file, and asked all the questions I'd expected. Did you receive notice of sale gnome? Were you ever consulted on demolition? Not once. Were you residing at the property at the time? Yes. For over 4 years. Do you have any documentation of paying taxes, utilities, or making repairs? I pulled out a separate envelope. Itemized receipts, bank statements, copies of 2 permit applications I filed for the porch and back window. He sat back slowly, brows lifting in genuine surprise. Miss Grant, this is very strong. They demolished a property they didn't own. That's not just a civil violation. That could be criminal mischief under Colorado law, especially if there's provable intent or financial gain. My heart thudded in my chest. Criminal. The word sounded so alien next to people I had once eaten Thanksgiving dinner with. "What happens next?" I asked. He tapped a pen against the folder. "First, we verify county records. If everything checks out, we'll send a formal cease and desist to the buyer and notify the family. Then we initiate a damages claim. Depending on the situation, we may escalate to court." I swallowed hard. "Is there a chance I get nothing back?" He gave a measured nod. "There's always a chance. But based on what I see, they're the ones who should be worried." That night, back at Jasmine's place, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Images flickered in my mind like broken film, Grandma Lorraine in the garden, pruning roses with her sun hat tilted sideways. The dent in the floorboard by the fireplace where Dad used to trip every Christmas morning. The bookshelf I built from scratch in college tucked into the hallway. All of it gone, reduced to rubble. And yet, not, because now I knew something they didn't. They thought they'd erased me. They thought they'd pulled off a quiet betrayal, leaving me no place to grieve, no ground to stand on. But they had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated Grandma Lorraine. And me. The next morning, Davis emailed me a scan of the county registrar confirmation the house had been legally mine since February 12th, 2021. His message ended with, "We're ready to proceed. Let me know when you'd like us to send the first letter." I stared at those words for a long moment. Proceed. Such a simple word for such a massive unraveling. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed send it. Later that day, the certified letters went out, one to the property developer, one to the demolition company, and one each to Tyler, Rachel, and Aunt Gloria. Jasmine and I sat on her fire escape that night, sipping ginger tea while she scrolled Zillow listings of tiny homes in places like Montana and New Mexico. "You think they'll freak out?" she asked. I shrugged. "I don't care if they scream, cry, or sue, but I want them to know what it feels like to be powerless, to be blindsided." Jasmine raised her mug like a toast to poetic justice. 3 days passed. Then, one afternoon, as I was finishing up a freelance project on structural shading design, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Then another. Then a text, "Isabel. Call me. Now." It was from Rachel. The same sister who'd told me you can't live in the past forever. I didn't reply. But curiosity gnawed at me. I opened the voicemail. Her voice, usually ice-cold and clipped, was rattled, shaky. "Isabel, what the hell is going on? Why is a lawyer telling me we destroyed your house? This has to be a mistake. You need to call me back immediately. We need to fix this." There it was. The crack in the armor, the unraveling. They were starting to realize. That night, I got an email from the law office. The property developer had halted the construction project. Their legal team requested a mediation meeting. Aunt Gloria called next. I didn't answer. She left a message anyway. "Sweetheart, I think we got off on the wrong foot. You know how confusing probate and estate stuff can be. Let's talk like family." I sat on Jasmine's couch, the voicemail still echoing in my ears. Like family. As if family was a charm you could summon when convenient and discard the rest of the time. But the thing about charms, they lose their power when you stop believing in them. And just as I was about to delete the voicemail, another ping came through an email this time. From a name I hadn't seen in years, my late grandmother's former estate attorney. Subject line, private addendum, Lorraine Grant's final will. My stomach dropped. I stared at the subject line, private addendum, Lorraine Grant's final will. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something more sacred reverence, maybe. That email wasn't just pixels on a screen. It was a ghost whispering through time. I clicked it open with trembling fingers. There it was, a scanned document dated exactly 1 week before Grandma Lorraine died. The file name read Addendum C, Personal Wishes. It wasn't part of the formal estate filings, which made sense now because this wasn't meant for court. This was meant for me. The first line hit like a prayer. "If you're reading this, Isabel, then the house is gone, and that breaks my heart more than I could ever say aloud." My throat closed. Her handwriting, delicate and loopy, floated across the page in fading black ink. "They never understood what this home meant to you, but I did. I saw the way you carried its memories, how you protected its corners like they held your father's laughter and your mother's quiet strength. I left you the deed for a reason, not out of guilt or charity, but because you were the only one who loved that place without wanting to own it." I swallowed hard. There were 3 pages, each filled with moments, her observations, her regrets, her hopes. And buried in the final paragraph was a single line that made my blood run cold. "If they ever tear it down, know this: there's a safe deposit box at Ridgeview Bank under your name. You'll need the red key I taped inside the back panel of my sewing chest. What's in there belongs to you and only you." I stood so fast the laptop slid off my knees. The sewing chest. I hadn't thought about it in months. It had been moved to a storage unit Rachel arranged when we cleared out the house. Or rather, when she ordered everything boxed up while I was out on a site visit. I had barely gotten a say in what stayed and what was sold. But I remembered seeing a photo, one of those blurry cell phone shots showing the old mahogany chest tucked in the back corner of Unit 27C at the Northview Storage Center. I had the login. Somehow, Rachel had left it linked to our joint family account. Probably an oversight, but a gift from the universe nonetheless. That night, I drove to the facility. The keypad blinked under the yellow security light as I typed in the access code. I found Unit 27C, lifted the garage-style door, and was hit by a dusty breath of cardboard and mothballs. And there it was, Grandma's sewing chest. Small, square, sturdy, worn in the corners like her favorite cardigans. I knelt beside it, heart hammering like a metronome out of sync, opened the lid. Fabric scraps, ribbons, a rusted pair of shears. I slid my hand along the back panel, then stopped. A tiny lump beneath the lining. I peeled it away slowly, like unwrapping something sacred. There, taped with brittle, yellowing Scotch tape, was a small red key. The next morning, I walked into Ridgeview Bank with the kind of unease reserved for crime shows and final test results. The vault attendant raised an eyebrow as I handed him the key and the ID. He typed something into a computer, nodded, and led me down a cold corridor that smelled like iron and air conditioning. The box was heavier than I expected. I carried it to the private viewing room and clicked it open. Inside, neatly stacked, was a thick folder of documents, a flash drive, and a small velvet pouch. I started with the folder. The top paper was a land survey, then old tax statements, building permits from the 1980s, photos of the house through different decades. But tucked deeper, something else. A letter dated 2003 from a local contractor confirming an unpermitted addition done in secret, paid for by my father in cash. It detailed a hidden basement room used to store valuables during a brief financial crisis when my parents feared foreclosure. My breath caught. That room had been walled up before I turned 10. Nobody spoke of it after. But now I had documentation proving it existed and was filled with heirlooms, possibly assets. Assets that might have been destroyed during demolition. The velvet pouch contained an heirloom ring, my grandmother's wedding band reset with a sapphire she always claimed came from the first good decision I ever made. I held it up to the light, and for a moment it flickered like something alive. The flash drive contained scanned copies of handwritten letters between my grandmother and the original property lawyer discussing how to legally protect me from the selfish scramble she feared would follow her death. She wasn't paranoid, she was prophetic. And then at the bottom of the box, a single folded document sealed in wax. I cracked it open, hands shaking. It was a notarized affidavit signed by Grandma Lorraine stating that the ring, the property, and all its historical contents were to remain solely in my care. She specifically named Tyler, Rachel, and Gloria as excluded beneficiaries of any family property. I stared at those names. She hadn't just left me the house. She had left them out, intentionally. And they had bulldozed their own inheritance. I left the bank with the velvet pouch clutched tight and my mind running faster than my feet. That night, Davis, my lawyer, confirmed everything. If they destroyed the basement and its contents, he said, you could be looking at a 6-figure damages claim, possibly more depending on how we value the heirlooms. And the affidavit. That's bulletproof. I barely slept. The next morning, a letter from the developer's legal team landed in my inbox. They were offering to settle quietly, a lowball sum. 6 figures, but just barely. I stared at it, my cursor hovering over reply. But before I could respond, I got another call. Blocked number. This time I answered. Rachel's voice came through, panicked. "Isabel, we need to talk, please. This is getting out of control." I kept my tone steady. "No, Rachel. It's finally getting under control." Then she said something I didn't expect. "There's something you don't know. Something about Grandma's will that she never told any of us. Gloria's been hiding it. And if I'm right, we're all in deeper trouble than we thought." Rachel's voice crackled through the phone like it had to fight its way past all the lies we'd built between us. "There's something you don't know. Something about Grandma's will. Gloria's been hiding it." For a moment, I just sat there staring at the sunlight filtering through Jasmine's kitchen blinds like a truth that hadn't reached me yet. I almost hung up. But curiosity, or maybe justice, kept my thumb from pressing end. "Go on," I said, not bothering to hide the ice in my tone. Rachel hesitated. I could practically hear her chewing the inside of her cheek. "After Grandma passed, we found a locked file cabinet in her old office, the one in the attic. Gloria kept saying it was empty, just old medical bills and sewing patterns. But last week, I went back to that unit. Something felt off. I found the cabinet shoved behind a bookshelf, and inside, there were 2 copies of a second will, not the one filed with the court. This one was handwritten, notarized, signed." She paused. "It names you as the primary heir, not just of the house, of everything, including the land trust, the pension fund, even the jewelry vault." I closed my eyes slowly, like I could stop the weight of that truth from pressing down on me. The pension fund. That was supposed to be managed by Gloria after Grandma passed. She claimed it had been depleted by medical expenses. But if this will was legitimate, then the fund still existed and Gloria had been siphoning from it for over a year. I kept my voice low. "Why are you telling me this now?" Rachel's voice broke. "Because Gloria's threatening to pin everything on me and Tyler. Says she never signed anything that we pushed the sale that we gave the order to demo the house. She's already lawyered up. If this goes to court, we'll be the ones buried, not her." My jaw clenched. "So you want me to save you?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I hung up. Not angrily, just finally. Jasmine glanced up from her desk as I walked past. "Bad news." I nodded. Rot spreads fast when you crack the wood. I spent the next few hours calling Davis and sending him the voicemail. Then I called Ridgeview Probate Office, where Grandma's estate was first processed, and requested a review of any supplemental wills. The clerk was polite but cautious. "Only the will on record has legal standing," she said. "But if you believe there was an intentional suppression of documents, you can file a formal petition for review." I did it within the hour. Filed, signed, notarized. By Thursday, Davis had filed a civil suit citing unlawful demolition fraud and estate tampering. The claims named the developer, the demolition contractor, and most damningly, Gloria, as the primary executor who concealed material documents. And then the dominoes began to fall. The developer's legal team immediately entered panic mode. Their building permit had been issued based on a signed sale from someone who never legally owned the house. That opened them to liability not just civil, but potentially criminal. Davis leveraged this and fast. He drafted a motion for injunctive relief halting further construction. The judge granted it within 24 hours. The site was frozen. Fencing went up, equipment removed. The lot stood empty, just a patch of dirt and the weight of everything they thought they'd buried. Meanwhile, Tyler called. For the first time in years, his voice was small. "I didn't know, Izzy. I swear. Gloria told us the house had passed to her through some legal transfer. Said you were just staying there out of pity. She said the taxes were in her name." I snorted. "Did you even ask to see the paperwork?" He went quiet. She was convincing. She always is. I didn't argue. I knew Gloria had a way of making venom taste like tea. She'd built her life on weaponized charm. But the truth was coming undone. Fast. That weekend, I drove out to Ridgeway Storage with Davis and a third-party estate investigator. Rachel met us there holding the cabinet key like it was about to burn her fingers. Inside were hundreds of documents. Letters, receipts, and 2 copies of the second, will both valid, both notarized, both naming me as the rightful heir to Grandma's full estate. Not just the house, the land under it, the adjoining property, a retirement account worth over $430,000, and buried in a footnote a jewelry vault registered in my name at a private bank in Boulder. I felt like I was peeling back the skin of my own history and finding something alive underneath. Gloria had tried to erase me from our family's legacy, not because she didn't believe I deserved it, but because she knew I did. Davis filed a supplemental affidavit with the court, and within 2 days, we had a hearing scheduled. Gloria didn't show up in person. Her lawyer did. But the silence said everything. The judge ordered a temporary freeze on all family-controlled assets until full review. The media didn't catch the story, not yet. But in my bones, I knew they would. Small-town scandal mixed with inheritance fraud. It writes itself. That night, I stood at the edge of the empty lot where my house had once stood. The dirt was uneven, pocked with tire marks and broken concrete. But it felt less like a grave and more like a battleground now. Jasmine joined me, arms crossed, scarf tight around her neck. "So what now?" she asked. I stared at the space that used to be our porch. "Now we rebuild." She glanced at me. "You mean the house?" I shook my head. "No, something better." But before I could say more, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. The voice on the other end was clipped. Official. "Miss Grant, this is Detective Alan Reese with the Ridgeway County Fraud Division. I'm calling in reference to the estate of Lorraine Grant. We've received a tip regarding suspicious financial activity tied to your grandmother's accounts. I'd like to speak with you in person." A pause. Then he added, "And I think you should know, Gloria's already hired a criminal defense attorney." Detective Alan Reese had the kind of voice that carried the weight of too many truths. Not just the facts, but the kind that make people stop mid-breath. "We've received a tip," he said, "and it appears Gloria may have been transferring money from your grandmother's pension fund into several shell accounts registered under her nonprofit." I nearly dropped the phone. Gloria's so-called spiritual wellness foundation, Sacred Alignments for the Soul, was apparently more than just a vanity project. It was a laundering tool. The detective asked to meet in person the next morning. I agreed, knowing this wasn't just about family anymore. This was about theft, legacy, and possibly jail time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the rhythmic hum of Jasmine's humidifier, watching the shadows slide across the ceiling. I kept thinking about Grandma's voice, soft but steady, whispering through all those letters, her warnings, her hopes. She'd tried to shield me from this, and now from beyond the grave, she was still protecting what mattered most. The next day, I met Detective Reese at a small corner office inside the Ridgeway County Courthouse. He wore a navy suit that had seen better days and a wedding ring that he spun absent-mindedly as we talked. He laid out the basics. Over the course of 18 months following Lorraine Grant's death, Gloria had transferred over $147,000 from the estate's holding account to her nonprofit. She had claimed the funds were being used for community grants, yoga outreach, and intergenerational healing seminars. But no such events had ever occurred. No venues rented, no taxes paid, no board of directors. It was a shell. All of it. She filed falsified reports with the IRS, Reese said, flipping through a manila folder. And we believe she backdated several expense claims to make it appear like the money was allocated before your grandmother passed. My throat went dry. "So what now?" I asked. If the DA chooses to pursue charges, he said she could be looking at fraud, elder financial abuse, tax evasion. Maybe even obstruction, depending on how deep the cover-up goes. I walked out of that office feeling like the sidewalk might collapse under me. Everything was real now. There was no more guessing, no more wondering who lied or why. Gloria had orchestrated this scheme with the grace of a seasoned manipulator, but her empire was built on sand. And it was finally caving in. That afternoon, Davis confirmed that the probate court had accepted the second will into review. A hearing date was set, and the temporary freeze on all Grant family assets had been extended. Tyler and Rachel were officially listed as co-respondents. Rachel texted me 3 times. The last one just said, "I wish I'd stood up to her." "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. Not out of bitterness, but because forgiveness doesn't always start with words. Sometimes it starts with consequences. Later that week, I visited the empty lot again. Cold wind blew dust over the foundation outlines, now barely visible. A child's toy car, likely dropped by a construction worker's kid, lay half buried near what used to be the garage. I picked it up, wiped off the dirt. It felt oddly sacred, a symbol of all that was lost and what still might grow. Then something unexpected happened. The developer's project manager called Davis. They didn't want to go to court. Too much press, too much liability. They offered a revised settlement mid-6 figures, plus a formal apology published in the Denver Journal. And surprisingly, they agreed to donate 10% of their future project revenue to local housing initiatives in Lorraine Grant's name. Davis called me immediately. "It's a smart play," he said. "They're protecting their reputation, but this is more than hush money. This is legacy." I asked for a night to think it over. That evening, I sat with Jasmine on her balcony, watching snow fall in soft flakes across the dark cityscape. "What if I don't want money?" I whispered. "What if I want it back, the home, the place? What if I rebuild it my way?" Jasmine smiled. "Then do it. Make it yours. Make it better." And that's when it hit me. Rebuilding wasn't just metaphor. I could do it. I had the blueprints. I drew them myself for a class years ago. I knew the structure. The zoning, the permits could be appealed. I could resurrect the house. Not as it was, but as it should have been. The next morning, I met with Davis and told him to accept the settlement on one condition: that I retain ownership of the lot with full rights to rebuild. The developer agreed. The lawsuit settled quietly, but the estate hearing was still ahead. The final twist came days later when a new document surfaced in Discovery. It was a signed letter from Grandma Lorraine to her financial advisor. Dated 6 months before her death, it outlined clear intent. The land and assets should empower Isabel to build something lasting. Not just for her, grandma wrote, but for the community. For women like her, forgotten, overlooked, underestimated. She'll know what to do. She always has. I clutched the printed letter like it was a lifeline. Tears blurred the ink. Jasmine placed a hand on my back and whispered, "This is your foundation now. Not just in law, in blood." But just when I thought the storm was settling, I received a subpoena from the court clerk. Gloria had filed a countersuit. She claimed the second will was forged, that I had manipulated an elderly woman under emotional duress, that I'd fabricated the safe deposit box contents. She wasn't backing down. And worse, she was bringing her own witnesses. The courtroom smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old paper, a sterile kind of air that didn't quite belong to justice, but to the performance of it. I sat next to Davis at the polished oak table, my hands folded tight in my lap, trying to keep from bouncing my leg. Across from me, Gloria sat with her legal team like a queen without a crown, draped in soft beige cashmere and fake humility. Her expression was calm, but her eyes, they flicked with fire, sharp, calculating, unrepentant. She had filed her countersuit swiftly, claiming the second will was a forgery and the safe deposit box evidence had been planted. But what chilled me wasn't the lie, it was who she brought to back it up. Her first witness was a retired notary, a friend from her yoga commune days. He testified that Grandma had once said she wanted everything to go to Gloria because she was the only one who understood energy flow and real estate. The jury looked unimpressed. One juror even raised an eyebrow. But the defense wasn't banking on him. Their real play was someone closer, someone unexpected. When the bailiff called the next witness, I froze. Rachel. She stepped into the witness box in a navy pantsuit, her hair tied back, posture straight. Her eyes darted toward me once, then away. "Please state your name for the record," the judge said. "Rachel Elise Grant, and your relation to the deceased granddaughter." Her voice didn't shake. It sounded rehearsed. The defense asked her to recall conversations she'd had with Grandma in the months before her death. Rachel claimed that Lorraine had grown increasingly forgetful and had mentioned being confused about paperwork and worried Isabel would be taken advantage of. I felt like my spine was melting into the seat. This was a knife to the back. And it wasn't just her words, it was how easily she slid into them, as if truth and betrayal shared the same mouth. Davis stood for cross-examination, calm as ever. "Miss Grant, did you personally witness the signing of the second will?" "Num. Did you ever discuss its existence with your grandmother?" "No." "So your testimony is based entirely on hearsay and your interpretation of her state of mind?" Rachel hesitated. "Yes. And are you aware that your name is explicitly excluded from the will in question?" A pause. "Yes. Are you aware that financial records show significant withdrawals from the estate account into a nonprofit registered under Gloria's name with no traceable public benefit?" Rachel's voice cracked. "I didn't know about the transfers." Davis nodded. "But you signed off on the property sale. Gloria told me we had to. Did you ever read the deed?" She blinked. "No." That was the break. The small fissure Davis had been waiting for. Over the next hour, he presented notarized documents, bank records, time-stamped email chains, and statements from the original estate attorney verifying the authenticity of the second will. He called in the Ridgeview notary who had signed the affidavit. She was 78, walked with a cane, and remembered Grandma Lorraine like it was yesterday. Her testimony was steady, clear, and carried more emotional weight than all of Gloria's smokescreens combined. But the twist came when Davis introduced a surprise third-party witness, Mr. Edward Morris, a retired estate investigator who had worked privately for Lorraine in the last year of her life. No one knew about him. Not me, not even Rachel. But apparently Grandma had hired him to track all financial activity related to her estate just in case. He had kept meticulous records, hidden deposits, recordings of phone calls, even surveillance footage of Gloria forging documents using Grandma's old signature pad. When the audio played in the courtroom, Gloria's voice calmly coaching a volunteer how to mimic Lorraine's signature. You could feel the room shift. It was over. Even her attorney looked like he'd swallowed glass. Still, the judge didn't issue a ruling right away. "We will reconvene for a formal judgment in 48 hours, he said, closing his notes. The gavel came down with a hollow knock that echoed through my ribs. Outside the courthouse, it had begun to snow. Thick, quiet flakes drifted over the city like erasers trying to wipe away everything that had been said inside those walls. Jasmine met me on the steps, handed me a cup of coffee, and didn't say a word. She didn't need to. But then, as I was unlocking my car door, I noticed a figure standing across the street near the edge of the parking lot. A man in a dark coat, tall, watching. Something about his stance felt familiar. He stepped forward as I approached. "Miss Grant?" His voice was deep-clipped. "I work with a private firm that was once retained by your grandfather during the 1980s. We recently unearthed documentation that may impact the ownership of not just 41 Hawthorne, but the entire adjoining property line. It appears your grandmother may have been holding land rights in a silent trust, one that predates the county's zoning reform." I stared at him, stunned. "What does that mean?" He opened a folder and handed me a map. The lot wasn't just the house. It was half the block. The map in my hands shook slightly, not from the cold, but from the magnitude of what I was seeing. Thick red lines traced the old property boundaries, zigzagging across backyards, alleys, and what were now multi-family housing units and a coffee shop. "This can't be real," I murmured. The man nodded. "It's called a silent legacy trust. Your grandfather established it in 1981 after Ridgeway County revised its zoning laws. Lorraine maintained it quietly. She kept the taxes paid through an intermediary account. Most likely why she was always so particular about her bookkeeping. Most of this land was never technically rezoned, which means if these documents hold up in court, it reverts to the named beneficiary. That's you. For a long moment, I just stood there, snowflakes catching on my lashes, my mind spinning. Half a block. That wasn't just property. That was power. That was leverage. And it changed everything. 2 days later, the judge issued his ruling. The second will was valid. Gloria's countersuit was dismissed with prejudice. The court transferred legal title of the estate assets, the jewelry trust, the land, everything into my name. Gloria's accounts were frozen, and an investigation into sacred alignments for the soul began immediately. Her lawyer tried to make a last-ditch appeal, citing emotional instability and undue influence, but it didn't fly. The recordings, the documents, the testimonies. They crushed her claims like glass under a boot. Rachel left the courtroom without looking at me. Tyler sent a single-word text later that evening. "Congrats." I never replied. Some endings don't need punctuation. But the story didn't end with the gavel. Not for me. Over the next few weeks, I worked with Davis with the estate planner and with a woman named Becca, an urban development consultant Grandma had quietly hired before her death. Turns out, Lorraine didn't just want to preserve the past. She wanted to reshape the future. In her journal, found in a drawer behind her fireplace, she'd written, "This land has held my grief. Now let it hold her power. Hold her." So, I did something bold. I announced the establishment of the Lorraine Grant Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing affordable housing for single women, over 50 widows, caretakers, survivors. Women like Grandma. Women like me. I commissioned a team to begin redesigning the lot, not as luxury condos, but as a community village, 6 homes, a shared garden, solar-powered roofs, and a small studio for crafts and teaching. We called it Lorraine Row. News spread fast. The Denver Journal did a full spread. Local TV stations picked it up. I sat in front of a camera with the same sapphire ring my grandmother left me glinting under studio lights. And I told the truth, not just about the fraud, the betrayal, the greed, but about the resilience, the legacy, the fight to reclaim what's sacred. People reached out. Strangers sent letters. Women wrote me about how they had been pushed aside by their families, made invisible by the systems they helped hold up. One woman said, "You didn't just get justice. You gave the rest of us permission to demand it." Still, some nights I'd lie awake wondering what Grandma would say if she saw all this. The lawsuits, the battles, the grief. But in my quietest moments, I swear I could hear her saying, "Not I'm proud of you, but I knew you would." Months passed. Lorraine Row broke ground in spring. Construction crews arrived. Jasmine became the foundation's outreach director. Davis took on 2 more cases like mine, quiet women, stolen estates, and silent wars they never wanted to fight. But just when I thought it was done, when the final paper was signed, the concrete poured the air finally still, I got a letter. It was postmarked from Nevada. The return address was for a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a notarized notice. There's another claimant to the trust, someone named Eleanor Marsh. And the letter read, "She has proof she's Lorraine Grant's firstborn daughter, and she wants to meet you." Sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom, it comes in the quiet resolve of those who refuse to be erased. Isabel didn't just reclaim a house. She reclaimed a legacy that others tried to bury beneath concrete and greed. The real inheritance wasn't land or money, it was voice, dignity, and truth. What this story teaches us is that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who stands beside you when the world turns cold. And that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Gloria thought no one would fight back. But one granddaughter with nothing left to lose changed everything. This wasn't just about property, it was about power. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about becoming whole. And sometimes, the person they tried to erase becomes the one who rewrites the story. If you found out your entire family betrayed you, but you had the power to take everything back, Would you forgive them, or would you make them feel what they made you live through story 2? I never thought a single question could upend everything. Yet there I was, sitting at our breakfast table staring at Lily as if she'd sprouted wings. My bachelorette trip is going to be 10 days in Ibiza with Marco, she said, scrolling her phone. He's been there twice. Trust me, it'll be epic. 10 days in Ibiza. With Marco, my soon-to-be brother-in-law. I'm James Carlisle, 33, operations manager at a tech firm. I own my condo outright and drive a paid-off Honda Civic. Not flashy, but solid. I met Lily 2 years ago at a friend's barbecue. She was 28, then a freelance lifestyle blogger with 500,000 followers. Her confidence drew me in. Her laugh made me forget stress. At first, she seemed perfect. She cooked me meals she invented. She stayed up late listening to me rant about work. She called me grounded in her posts, saying I brought stability to her whirlwind life. But stability comes at a price, especially when one person does all the giving. Over those 2 years, small things piled up. She'd forget her wallet at dinners I paid for. She'd drop hints, designer shoes, lavish vacations, then pout when I suggested a staycation. She insisted grand gestures were proof of love. And when I balked, she'd sigh that I didn't understand her dreams. My best friend Noah saw it too. We've been tight since college. Noah owns a craft brewery and has an eye for sincerity or the lack of it. He'd lean back, arms crossed, and say, "Buddy, she's drawing lines in the sand, not building bridges." I laughed it off at first. I thought he was just old school and jealous. Then came the engagement. She dropped to one knee with a ring that cost more than my car. I thought, this is it. She loves me. Seconds later, she snapped a selfie and posted. He finally popped the question, blessed. No, I love you. No excitement, just a status update. Wedding planning followed. The venue she chose was a beachfront villa at $12,000 for 2 days. The dress she tried on was $400 or $500. Photographer $5,000. She glided through Pinterest boards like a queen picking jewels. I was cast as the silent sponsor. I swallowed my pride and my budget. A wedding is supposed to be about love, not ledgers. But Lily was determined to host an unforgettable experience. Her parents offered no help. They said it was our generation's tradition for the couple to pay. Then came that morning over coffee. I poured my espresso. She tapped out her message. Marco and I have already booked the villa suite. I need you to approve the guest list, me, Marco, and his sister Renee. I set down the cup. Just you two, she shrugged. That's the plan? You're flying halfway across Europe for a girls-only trip, I said, but you want Marco there. Renee is busy, she replied. And Marco's my best travel buddy. He knows the hot spots. I laughed, without humor. And me, I'm here to pay for the villa and wait. She looked at me bored. You'll have fun at home? You can plan your own bachelor party. Plan my own party. In the shadow of her luxury escape, that hit harder than a slap. I remember the way her eyes flicked to my ring finger and then away, as if the promise between us was just another accessory in her life. My chest tightened. My mind raced. Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep, I texted Noah, "Me, you up, Noah, always. What's good?" Me, Lily's bachelorette is 10 days in Ibiza. With Marco. Noah, dude, not okay. Me, I know. I want her to regret this. Noah replied with a thumbs-up emoji. He asked, who do we know in Ibiza? I didn't have an answer. I just knew I needed something big. Something she'd never see coming. But first, I had to play my part. The next morning, I put on my best smile and said, I'm excited for you, love. You deserve this getaway. Her face lit up. She kissed my cheek. Thanks, babe. You're the best. She had no clue I was already drafting my own plan. The morning sun spilled across my desk as I drafted the first lines of my plan. My heart pounded with equal parts dread and excitement. I fired off a message to Noah asking for names of anyone he knew in Ibiza. He replied almost instantly, Anna. She manages villas out there. I stared at the name. I'd met Anna once at his brewery launch, tall, olive-skinned, sharp eyes. She'd joked about running a little empire of holiday homes. Perfect. I found her email. I wrote a polite note. Hey Anna, long time. I need a favor. Urgent villa logistics. I kept it vague but friendly, slipping in enough charm to get her attention. Then I called my bank and increased my international transfer limit. I couldn't afford any slip-ups. Next, I scoured TripAdvisor for warnings about Lily's chosen villa. Nothing. It was rated 5 stars, even with rave reviews about secluded paradise and flawless service. I felt a twinge of guilt. Sabotaging a honeymoon-style getaway felt harsh, but my pride had bled dry under Lily's endless demands. I needed her to feel a fraction of the insecurity I'd swallowed for months. When Anna replied, she was surprisingly enthusiastic. I know that property well, she typed. I can arrange a maintenance issue, power outage, water cut, something dramatic. She asked for dates and a coded security question to confirm my identity. I supplied both. Her next message gave me a cold thrill. Consider it done. Enjoy your peace of mind. I exhaled hard, my chest tightening around a knot of guilt and anticipation. Over the next 2 days, I watched Lily's packing updates scroll across my feed, photos of straw hats, snapshots of her designer luggage. She gushed about sunlit pools and rooftop bars, tagging Marco in every post. My stomach turned. I reminded myself why I was doing this. She needed to understand that luxury bought with my money didn't equal love. On the eve of her departure, I met Noah at our usual late-night haunt. He slid a glass of stout across the bar. Anna's in, he said with a grin. I tapped my watch. Countdown's on. We toasted in silence. He knew the stakes. He knew how hard I'd fallen for Lily's smile and how sharp her indifference felt. Back home, I set my phone to silent and watched Netflix to calm my mind. Every line of dialogue felt like a mirror to my guilt. I showered before bed and stood in front of the mirror. My own eyes looked tired, haunted. Was this me, a schemer, a fraud? I shoved the thought away. Tomorrow I'd be me again, the real me, the one she said she loved. At dawn, a text from Anna arrived. Issue triggered. Villa management alerted. Owner scrambling. Estimated resolution 48 hours. My pulse hammered. I almost replied, but I held back. Let Lily sweat for a bit. Hours later, Lily boarded her flight. Marco waved goodbye, his face lit with excitement. I stood awkwardly on the tarmac, held her hand, kissed her cheek. Have the best time, I said, smiling wide despite the knot in my gut. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thanks for understanding." Then she marched toward security. I watched her go until she disappeared behind glass. I shut my eyes, imagining them touching down, stepping into the villa and finding darkness. No poolside cocktails, no ambient music, just empty halls and a sinking feeling. After she left, I tried to work. Emails and spreadsheets blurred into one endless scroll. My phone buzzed with group chats of coworkers planning our next quarter. I answered each one with robotic politeness, my mind back in Ibiza. By midday, I couldn't concentrate, so I drove to Noah's brewery. He greeted me with 2 pints and a sympathetic nod. I straightened my shirt and joined him at a small table near the barrels. So he asked. I lifted my glass. Anna's negligence is on schedule. He chuckled, but his eyes were serious. Be ready for fallout. She might call you if the owner cries wolf. I nodded. I'd prepared for follow-up calls. I had the cash ready for hush fees. Everything was covered. I left before the brewery got crowded. On the drive home, rain began to fall. Each drop tapped against my windshield like an accusation. My reflection stared back, weary and anxious. I told myself this was temporary, just a warning shot. A way to show Lily how small I felt when her world ran on my dime. By evening, the first wave of texts hit my phone. Lily, to our families, pro tip, never trust villa listings. Ours has a major blackout. Marco's reply, we're safe, renting backup hotel. But it's not the same. Then a message to me. Sorry you missed the drama. Wish you were here to save the day. I stared. My thumb hovered over the screen. I typed, hope you find something nice. Can't wait to hear the story. I paused. Deleted it. I typed instead, I'm here if you need anything. Feel better soon. I pressed send. The lie tasted bitter. I sank onto the couch and stared at the ceiling. The plan was working too well, but as thunder rolled outside, I realized I'd crossed a line. There was no turning back now. I woke to my phone blazing with texts from Lily and Marco. Each message pinged like a warning. Lily's name flashed in urgent red brackets. She wrote, James, we're stranded. Hotel fell through. They overbooked. My heart sank. Despite my plan, I had not wanted her real distress. I stared at her words and felt a punch of regret. I scrolled to Marco's text, sleeping in the lobby. It's pouring rain. My chest tightened. This was beyond inconvenience. It was humiliation. I tapped a reply and wrote, check your email. I sent details. After I hit send, I opened my laptop and drafted a message to Anna Urgent Book Alternate Suite. 5-star. Charge to my account. I hesitated over the cost, then clicked send. The confirmation pinged immediately. The price was steep. I felt that familiar knot of guilt. But I owed it to her to be decent. By afternoon, an email arrived, suite confirmed. Keys at front desk. I forwarded it to Lily with a simple note. Stay safe. Enjoy the view. She sent back a blue heart. Relief washed through me, mingled with shame. That evening, I met Noah at the brewery. He offered a sympathetic grin and a pint. We sat among aging barrels, and he said, You did the right thing. I nodded, but the feeling was heavy. On the drive home, rain pattered on the windshield like a slow confession. I replayed my choices. Revenge had soured into rescue. I wondered which would define us. At the house, a courier slip caught my eye. I called the service and arranged delivery for tomorrow, a bouquet of white lilies and a note promising honesty. The act felt raw. I wasn't sure if I sought forgiveness or punishment. Sleep wouldn't come easily. The next morning, I awoke before sunrise. My phone lay silent, a rarity. I dressed quickly, slipped into my Civic, and drove to a quiet cafe downtown. I ordered black coffee and watched the sun climb. I pulled out my notebook and scribbled my conflicted thoughts. Love as currency, kindness as debt, truth as liability. My pen faltered. I closed the notebook and took a deep breath. The questions hung unanswered as I stepped into the drizzle. At work, I settled into back-to-back meetings. My mind drifted to Lily. During a budget presentation, I nearly called the hotel by mistake. My colleague shot me a puzzled look. I caught myself and forced a smile. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. By lunchtime, I escaped to the rooftop garden. I ate a sandwich while scrolling through news about Ibiza resorts. I bookmarked one story on managing unexpected blackouts as if preparing for another crisis. I chuckled at my own obsession. On the way back, I stopped at the florist again. I admired lilies. Their petals were soft as silk. I paid for the bouquet and arranged them in the passenger seat. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked tired but determined. I thought of the note I would write. Words of truth I promised myself. When I returned home that evening, I found the blooms waiting in my car seat. I carried them upstairs and placed them on the kitchen table. I sat opposite the vase, staring at each delicate curve. I pulled out the draft I had written Lily. I need to tell you about my plan, why I did it, and what I regret. I read it aloud. The words felt heavy like thin slabs of confession. I reworked the note 3 times, balancing accountability with vulnerability. After I was satisfied, I folded the message and slipped it under the flowers. I hit send on the courier request, deliver tomorrow at 10 a.m. Then I turned off notifications and sank into my couch. The living room felt empty, yet full of memories. Photos from our early dates lined the mantel, her in a sundress at the farmer's market, us laughing at a backyard barbecue. I took each frame down and dusted it with my sleeve. I remembered how alive we were then. A tear slid down my cheek. I whispered to the silent room, "I miss you." My phone buzzed. A message from Noah read, "How's your soul?" I typed, mangled but hopeful. He replied, "That's a start?" I smiled through the tears. Later that night, I called Lily. Her voice was soft when she answered. I asked about the suite. She paused, then said, "It's perfect." I keep pinching myself. I told her I was glad. We talked for 20 minutes about the view, the weather, the colors of dawn. She sounded genuinely happy. I held the phone away from my ear and breathed deeply. I didn't confess. Not yet. Instead, I ended the call with "Sleep well. I'll see you soon." I placed the phone down and stared at the ceiling. I wondered if our next meeting would bring truth or rupture. I wondered if honesty could heal what deception had broken. Somewhere between hope and fear, I drifted to sleep. In my dreams, I was a boy again, crouched beneath my parents' dinner table as they fought about money. The thunder of their voices shook the walls. My sister cried. My mother slammed dishes. I pressed my cheek to the cool floor and vowed I would never feel that powerless again. That vow had led me here, to sabotage, to rescue, to confession. When I woke, I carried the echo of that scared child in my chest. Tomorrow, the flowers would arrive. Tomorrow, her reaction would write our next page. In the hush before dawn, I realized the real storm had only begun. I woke to sunlight slicing through the blinds and my phone lighting up with a delivery confirmation the lilies had arrived. My heart thudded as I stared at the vase on my kitchen table, the petals pure white against my guilt-darkened mood. I smoothed my tie, poured coffee into my favorite mug, and hesitated before lifting my phone. I opened a message from the courier left at front desk, "Enjoy." No note that it had been passed along, no sign of hesitation. I tapped out a text to Lily. "Did the flowers make it through?" and watched the typing indicator spin. My chest felt tight, as if I'd invited a storm inside my own bones. When her reply came seconds later, "They're here. Who sent them?" I realized I'd set this trap for both of us. My thumb hovered over the keys, and I decided honesty, however jagged, was better than another lie. I typed "me," read the note. Then I waited. My coffee grew cold. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, my phone rang, Lily's name glowing on the screen. I swallowed. "Why did you do this?" Her voice was low, trembling with something I couldn't name. Anger, fear, betrayal. I swallowed again, my words tangling. I messed up. I thought you needed a wake-up call." She laughed, sharp and brittle. "A wake-up call. You sabotaged me. You watched me drown in your guilt and waited to rescue me like a knight. That's not love, James. It's manipulation." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of every small deceit I'd built into this scheme. I was angry, I admitted. Angry that I felt useless whenever you tagged Marco on your posts. Angry when I paid for dreams you never asked me to share. I let pride twist me into someone I don't recognize. Her silence was a cold verdict. When she spoke again, her voice cracked. "You broke me the moment you decided to play puppet master. I trusted you." Her words struck me harder than any lie I could ever tell. I tried to apologize, but the syllables felt empty. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Truly. I want to fix this, whatever it takes." Her next words were unexpected. "I don't know if I can trust you or if I even want to see you right now." The line went dead before I could beg for more. My thumb hovered over the red end call icon, reluctant to let go of the sound of her pain. Finally, I pressed it. I sank onto my couch, lilies trembling beside me. Each petal felt like a question. Was love a currency? Was kindness a debt? I pulled out my laptop and drafted a message. Not a plan this time, but an apology, unspooling straight from my chest. I paused over each word, determined to offer nothing but my raw truth. Once I was done, I hit send to Lily's email. I will come to Ibiza. I will face whatever you need me to face. I'm on the next flight. I booked the ticket with hands that shook so badly I nearly mistyped the destination. Before I hit confirm, I dialed Noah. He answered on the first ring, his voice calm. Heard you had a showdown. I exhaled. I'm flying out tonight. He was silent a moment, then said, Be ready for anything. I swallowed down my fear and said, I know. As I zipped my bag and switched off lights, I stared at the lilies one last time. Their petals were flawless, forgiving two things I wasn't sure I deserved. I whispered to the empty room, I'm sorry. Then I locked the door behind me and headed to the airport, not knowing if I was rushing toward reconciliation or further heartbreak. All I knew was that tomorrow, under Ibiza's sun, I would stand before her and tell the whole truth, or lose her forever. I stepped off the taxi before dawn, my feet sinking into the villa's gravel drive as the sky blushed pink. My bag thudded at my side. Every heartbeat felt like a drum roll. I smoothed my shirt and approached the front door, hesitating only a moment before pressing the bell. The chime echoed through silent halls. Seconds later, Lily opened the door, her eyes rimmed red, her hair damp from an early swim. Her face went pale at the sight of me. James, she whispered, voice trembling. I offered a small, uncertain smile. I'm here. She stepped aside wordlessly. I followed her through the marble foyer into the courtyard where the morning sun caught droplets on the fountain's stone edge. Water tinkled like distant laughter. It felt surreal to stand here after all I'd done. She walked ahead without speaking, tracing her fingertips along the low wall. I watched her silhouette so familiar yet distant. I wanted you to know no more lies, I said finally. Voice hushed against the dawn. She paused, gaze on the horizon. Why now? She asked flatly. Because I can't fix us from a screen. I inhaled, then laid out every detail, my hurt, the villa blackout, my guilt, the rescue, and the confession. I didn't soften the truth or hide my shame. I spoke until the words wore thin. When I finished, a sea breeze picked up carrying salt and the promise of forgiveness, or final farewell. Lily's lips pressed into a straight line. I feel battered, she said evenly. But I appreciate your honesty. She glanced at the fountain's ripples. You flew halfway across Europe for this. I nodded. I couldn't stay away. Her shoulders slackened as if relief and tension unknotted at once. We moved to a pair of wrought iron chairs on the terrace. I watched her study me. The early light revealed traces of tears on her cheeks. I passed her a bottle of water. She took it without a word. Silence stretched, not heavy but expectant, as though the next words might tilt us toward ruin or repair. After the blackout, she said softly, I felt vulnerable, yes. But when the sweet arrived, I saw your care. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I hated being at your mercy, but I hated more that I'd never considered what you needed. My chest loosened. I never wanted to hold power over you, I replied. I wanted balance. Lily looked down at her hands, fingers laced. We both made mistakes. I leaned forward. I'm sorry I made you afraid to trust me. She lifted her gaze, eyes glimmering in the pink sky. And I'm sorry I made you invisible behind my posts. Our apologies intertwined like a dance we'd been learning. The breeze carried birdsong, an audience of one. A moment later, Marco emerged from the villa's shadow, coffee in hand. He offered a tentative smile. Morning, he said quietly. Lily nodded. I studied her face. She gave him a small grin, then turned back to me. This is how we start again, she said. With daylight and truth. I exhaled, feeling the weight of every misstep lift slightly. Together, I asked. She reached out and took my hand, her fingers cool against my palm. Together, she echoed, though her voice wavered. We rose and walked toward the edge of the terrace where turquoise waves broke on white sand. Lily slipped off her sandals, the dawn's warmth seeping into her toes. I followed. Neither of us spoke. The sea had more words than we did. When I looked at her, she looked back steady, hopeful, cautious. Before the sun climbed higher, Lily paused and faced me fully. "I need time to rebuild trust," she said, "but I want to try." I nodded, relief and anticipation mingling in my chest. "I'll be here." The light spilled over us, gilding her hair. In that quiet hour beneath an awakening sky, we chose to begin again, fragile as a dawn breeze, but real. As the sea kissed the shore, I realized that forgiveness wasn't an end point, but a journey. And our journey had only just begun. I stepped away from the terrace at midday, my hand still warm in Lily's, as we wandered down the pebbled path toward the beach. The sun hung low, softening our shadows into long, quiet shapes. We hadn't spoken much since our dawn confession, but silence felt comfortable now, a shared promise that words could wait. When we reached the water's edge, Lily kicked off her sandals and let the waves lap at her ankles. I followed, feeling the cool surf swirl around my feet, like a gentle reminder that healing starts where land meets sea. She picked up a flat pebble and skipped it twice before it sank. "I've been thinking about us," she said, voice low as she selected another stone. "About how I shared every moment online without asking if you wanted to share it with me." I nodded, tracing patterns in the sand with my toes. "I forgot that real moments don't need an audience." She skipped her pebble into the waves. "I want us to live first, post later." Her words felt like a gift. We walked barefoot, collecting smooth stones and tossing them back into the surf, each splash fanning out ripples like new possibilities. Eventually, we found a shaded spot beneath a windswept olive tree. Its branches stretched toward the sea leaves, whispering in the breeze. We sat side by side on a weathered log, shoulders touching. I opened my bag and took out a small journal, my childhood diary, the one I'd hidden for years. "I brought this," I said. Lily turned it over in her hands. "Our vows," I explained, but not the wedding kind. A simple list of what matters most to me. I read aloud, "Speak honestly, even when it hurts. Listen without judgment. Laugh twice a day. Respect each other's dreams." Her smile brightened like morning light. She reached over to write her own vows on the empty pages. Support his goals. Remember to ask. Offer kindness freely. Trust without fear. We sealed our pledges with a quiet promise to revisit them each day. After we finished, Lily closed the journal and leaned her head on my shoulder. We both sighed, the kind of breath that loosens the chest after holding too much weight. Later, we strolled into the village market hand in hand, tasting fresh figs and sampling local cheeses. No cameras, no posts, just two people rediscovering each other through color and taste and laughter. Lily paused at a stall selling woven bracelets. She picked up one for each of us. She tied mine on before slipping hers onto her wrist. The slender cords reminded me that strength comes from many strands woven together. In the late afternoon, Marco and Renee appeared unannounced but welcome with iced tea and scoops of gelato. They'd heard about our reunion and wanted to celebrate. The four of us shared stories under a pergola draped in bougainvillea, the air fragrant with pink blossoms. Marco raised his glass. To honesty, he toasted. Renee nodded, her eyes kind. To new beginnings. We clinked cups, the sound bright against the hum of cicadas. As evening approached, Lily and I slipped away to the villa's rooftop. Lanterns flickered to life around us, casting soft light on our faces. We lay side by side on a chaise lounge, shoulders touching as we watched stars emerge over the Mediterranean. "I feel like I'm falling in love with you all over again," Lily whispered, turning to meet my gaze. I brushed a strand of hair from her face and said, "And I'll keep earning that love every day." Later, back in our room, I slipped the journal onto the nightstand. Lily switched off her lamp and reached for my hand in the dark. When I woke before dawn the next morning, I made coffee for both of us and carried 2 steaming mugs onto the balcony. The world was still quiet except for distant waves. Lily joined me, her eyes puffy but shining. I handed her a mug and we drank in companionable silence, savoring the simple ritual. We talked about how we'd handle money from now on, budget meetings instead of surprise charges, and how we'd set social media boundaries that felt right for both of us. We sketched a plan, monthly check-ins, shared savings goals, and a promise to consult each other before big decisions. By the time we walked down the stairs to catch our flight home, our laughter had returned light and easy. On the taxi ride to the airport, Lily reached across the seat and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for fighting for us," she said. I smiled and kissed her knuckles. "Thank you for trusting me again." When the plane lifted off, I watched Ibiza shrink beneath us, its cliffs, its olive groves, its shoreline etched in foam. Lily rested her head on my shoulder as I closed my eyes. I thought of the boy under his parents' table, scared and powerless, and how far I'd come. We had weathered a storm of our own making and found a new rhythm. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but as her breath warmed my arm, I felt certain of one thing: trust could be rebuilt moment by moment, like stones in the surf, one gentle toss at a time.